It was a gloomy, overcast day when the Forrester family arrived at Hollowwood Manor. Their new home, the imposing Victorian mansion, stood tall, its dark stone facade exuding an eerie, almost sinister aura. The local townsfolk whispered tales of its tragic history. But the Forrester family had been blind to the warnings, enticed by the inexplicable allure of the decrepit house. Nina Forrester, her husband Richard, and their two children, Lily and Jake, were drawn to Hollowwood Manor by its inexplicable beauty. Its decaying charm seemed to beckon them, and they had found themselves utterly captivated by its haunting presence. Little did they know that their dream home would soon turn into a nightmare. The first night in Hollowwood Manor was restless for the Forrester family. The wind howled through the old trees surrounding the mansion, making the windows rattle. The house seemed to breathe, emitting strange creaks and moans, as if it were alive. In the middle of the night, Nina awoke to a chilling whisper echoing through the corridors. But when she investigated, she found nothing amiss. As the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences became more frequent. Muffled footsteps echoed in the hallways when no one else was around, and faint, ghostly apparitions appeared in mirrors. Children claimed to have seen a shadowy figure lurking in their room at night. Lily, the younger of the two, had begun to have vivid nightmares that left her trembling in fear. They felt trapped in their own home, yet no one wanted to admit that something was terribly wrong. One evening, Richard was exploring the attic, which had been sealed for decades. Among the dusty old relics, he found an ornate, tattered journal. The diary belonged to the original owner of Hollowwood Manor, a reclusive occultist named Samuel Blackwood. Samuel's entries spoke of dark rituals and summoning spirits from another world. Richard dismissed it as mere fantasy, but as he descended from the attic, the air grew colder and a strange presence seemed to follow him. As the weeks passed, the haunting activity escalated. Objects moved on their own, and whispers became chilling, malevolent voices. The once beautiful mansion had become a prison, and the family was unraveling. Lily's nightmares grew worse, and she claimed to have seen a grotesque, shadowy figure that beckoned her from the shadows. Jake, usually a stoic teenager, had become sullen and withdrawn, his sleepless eyes filled with dread. Desperation set in, and the Forrester family sought help from a local paranormal expert. The expert, Dr. Eleanor Hargrove, arrived at Hollowwood Manor with a bag full of equipment, including EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and voice recorders. She immediately sensed the oppressive atmosphere in the house. Dr. Hargrove set up her equipment and began her investigation. The paranormal activity seemed to intensify in her presence, as if the spirits were angered by her intrusion. The EMF detectors spiked erratically, and chilling whispers were captured on the voice recorders. Dr. Hargrove's face turned pale as she showed the Forrester family the recordings. They heard a spectral voice, wailing and pleading for release from the eternal torment it had suffered. The family couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Hollowwood Manor was indeed haunted, and its malevolent spirits were growing more powerful by the day. Dr. Hargrove recommended a cleansing ritual, but the dark presence in the house vehemently resisted. The ritual descended into chaos, as objects flew across the room, and the family members were thrown about by unseen forces. The Forrester family realized they had no choice but to leave. They packed their belongings in haste, hoping that once they vacated the cursed mansion, the haunting would cease. But the spirits of Hollowwood Manor had other plans. As they left the house, a deafening roar echoed from within, and the mansion seemed to contort and shift, its architecture warping before their eyes. It was as if the house itself refused to let them go. Desperation gripped them as they drove away, but their ordeal was far from over. The malevolent spirits followed them, manifesting in their new home and tormenting them wherever they went. The Forrester family had unwittingly become prisoners to the curse of Hollowwood Manor. Their nights were sleepless, filled with horrifying apparitions and chilling whispers. Lily's nightmares became a nightly ritual, and Jake's once bright eyes had turned hollow and vacant. Richard and Nina felt a sense of hopelessness creeping over them, as if the darkness had seeped into their very souls. One fateful night, as the Forrester family huddled together in their new home, they heard a mournful voice whispering from the shadows. It was Samuel Blackwood, the original owner of Hollowwood Manor, who had become a tormented spirit himself. His anguished voice begged for release from the curse that bound him to the house, a curse that had now ensnared the Forrester family as well. With tears in their eyes, the family finally understood the truth. They had to return to Hollowwood Manor and confront the malevolent spirits once and for all. With Dr. Hargrove's guidance, they performed a perilous ritual, risking their very souls to free themselves and Samuel Blackwood from the curse that had bound them. As the ritual unfolded, the mansion itself seemed to groan and shudder. But they persevered. In a blinding flash of light, the malevolent spirits were banished, and Hollowwood Manor was finally at peace. Samuel Blackwood's spirit, freed from its torment, offered the Forrester family a solemn nod of gratitude before vanishing into the ether. Hollowwood Manor, once a house of horrors, stood silent and still. The Forrester family had endured a nightmare that had brought them to the brink of despair, but they emerged stronger, having confronted their fears and the malevolent forces that had plagued them. The house had regained its eerie, decaying charm. But the Forrester family had learned the hard way that sometimes the allure of a place can hide a dark and sinister secret, one that may haunt you for a lifetime. The Patterson family had been searching for the perfect home for months, and when they stumbled upon the Weatherford mansion, they thought their dreams had come true. A sprawling Victorian estate nestled deep in the woods, it exuded an eerie, captivating charm. The house stood empty, its previous owner having mysteriously disappeared, and it was available at a price too good to pass up. The Pattersons were thrilled to start a new chapter in their lives. Upon their arrival, the family was taken aback by the towering facade of the mansion. The building had an eerie aura that gave them pause, but the beauty of the mansion quickly quelled their unease. Its grand entryway led into an expansive living room adorned with antique furniture. The place had an old-world charm that fascinated them, from the ornate chandeliers to the intricate woodwork. As the days passed, the family settled into their new home. Strange occurrences began to unfold, but they dismissed them as mere coincidences. At night, they heard whispers drifting through the hallways, but they attributed it to the old house's creaky structure. Shadows danced in their peripheral vision, and objects seemed to move when no one was around, but they convinced themselves that it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. However, the unease that had initially lingered did not dissipate. Emily, the teenage daughter, claimed to have seen a spectral figure lurking in the corner of her room at night. She described it as a gaunt, ghostly silhouette with hollow eyes that seemed to peer into her very soul. Her parents, John and Susan, thought it was just a recurring nightmare, But Emily's pallor and sleepless nights told a different story. One evening, while exploring the attic, John stumbled upon an old photo album filled with pictures of the Weatherford family. The images portrayed the family's happier days, but they were marred by one disturbing detail. In every photo, the family members' eyes were missing, replaced by dark voids. Despite the growing unease, the Pattersons were reluctant to leave the house they had come to love. But the mansion's dark secrets were eager to reveal themselves. On a stormy night, the family gathered in the living room to play board games, seeking solace in each other's presence. As they played, they noticed the temperature in the room dropping rapidly. Their breath formed frosty plumes in the air, and the candles flickered ominously. The room seemed to come alive with ghostly apparitions. The whispering they had dismissed as mere echoes in the house grew louder and more sinister, and the shadowy figures became more tangible. Emily's spectral visitor appeared again, its empty eyes boring into her. John and Susan saw figures from the photo album materialize, their eyeless faces twisted in anguish. Fear coursed through their veins as they realized that the Weatherford mansion was not what it seemed. It was a place where restless spirits dwelled, their eyes stolen by some malevolent force. The Pattersons were trapped in a nightmarish realm, and they couldn't ignore the horrifying reality any longer. Desperate for help, the family turned to a local paranormal investigator, Dr. Helen Anderson, who had experience with cases of malevolent hauntings. Dr. Anderson arrived with an array of equipment and immediately sensed the oppressive atmosphere in the mansion. She set up her instruments and began her investigation. The ghostly activity intensified in her presence, as if the spirits were angry at her intrusion. The temperature dropped dramatically, and the whispering became an unsettling chorus of wails and pleas. Dr. Anderson's voice recorder captured heart-wrenching voices begging for release. As the investigation unfolded, the mansion itself seemed to come alive, as if it were fighting to keep its dark secret. The chandeliers swayed, and the grand furniture moved on its own, as if propelled by unseen forces. Emily, once a skeptical teenager, trembled in fear, her belief in the supernatural confirmed. As Dr. Anderson reviewed the recordings, the spirits grew even more agitated. The mansion seemed to warp and shift, its walls contorting and pulsating. The malevolent force that had tormented the Pattersons was not ready to let them go. In a desperate attempt to save themselves, the family gathered in the living room, candles lit, and began a perilous ritual. They invoked the spirits, hoping to appease them and bring an end to the haunting. The room grew colder, and the whispering grew into a deafening roar. The ritual reached its climax, and the mansion seemed to convulse. The spirits were in turmoil, but the family held their ground. With a blinding flash of light, the malevolent presence was banished, and the Weatherford mansion stood silent and still. The Pattersons had survived the ordeal, but the scars of their haunted house would never fade. They had learned that some houses hold secrets too dark to be contained, and that the darkness within can consume those who dare to enter. The Weatherford mansion was a beautiful, enigmatic abode that had nearly claimed their lives, a reminder that beauty can hide the most malevolent of secrets. When Emily and Michael found their new home, they thought it was the perfect place for their fresh start. The old ivy-covered mansion had been vacant for years, perched on a hill overlooking the quaint town of Wisteria Hollow. It was a steal at half the price of other houses in the area, but the locals had whispered about the property for generations. They said the house was cursed, haunted by a presence so malevolent that even the bravest of souls dared not enter. Emily and Michael, however, paid no heed to these rumors. They believed that a house could not hold such power over its inhabitants. They would soon learn how wrong they were. On the day they moved in, the sun hid behind thick gray clouds, casting a pall over the mansion. As the moving truck pulled away, Emily and Michael stood on the porch, looking at their new home with mixed emotions. There was something unsettling about the way the shadows clung to the house, as if reluctant to let go. Yet Emily brushed off her unease and began exploring the mansion's many rooms. In the dimly lit parlor, a chill ran down Emily's spine. Even though the air was stifling, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, and faint whispers seemed to fill the room, just beyond the edge of comprehension. Michael, entering from the hallway, noticed her unease and tried to reassure her. "Must be the old house settling," he said. But Emily was not convinced. She couldn't help but feel that the mansion had a mind of its own. That night, as they lay in bed, Emily and Michael heard the softest, most unsettling whispering. The sound seemed to come from within the walls, and it filled the room like a haunting lullaby. They couldn't make out the words, but it was as if the very air itself was whispering secrets. The couple tossed and turned, unable to sleep, but when they ventured out to investigate, the whispering ceased. The next day, Emily decided to ask the townspeople about the strange occurrences. She visited the local library and spoke to an elderly librarian. Miss Wainwright. The librarian's eyes widened when Emily mentioned her new home. "Honey, you bought that place?" she asked, her voice trembling. "People say it's haunted, you know. They say the whispering never stops, and the house has a dark history." Emily pressed for details, but Miss Wainwright only gave her a hesitant look and whispered, "If you want to know more, visit the town's historian, Mr. Thornton. But be careful, dear." With this newfound information, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. She drove to Mr. Thornton's cottage, an old, weathered structure nestled on the outskirts of Wisteria Hollow. When she mentioned the house on the hill, his eyes grew grave. "Ah, Hollow Hill Mansion," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a curse on this town for over a century. The land it's built on was once a sacred site for the indigenous people. They say the mansion's foundations are stained with the blood of its builders." Emily listened in rapt attention as Mr. Thornton recounted the stories of madness, despair, and tragedy that had befallen the mansion's occupants. Many had gone mad hearing the relentless whispers and feeling the oppressive presence within the house. Some had even taken their own lives, unable to bear the torment any longer. As Emily left Mr. Thornton's cottage, her mind raced with uncertainty. She was tempted to share what she had learned with Michael, but she didn't want to scare him. Instead, she decided to research the house herself. She returned to the mansion, delving into the local archives, uncovering a slew of articles and journals detailing the mansion's dark history. A name appeared again and again in the records: Isabella Hollowhill, the original owner of the mansion, who had tragically lost her husband, Daniel. In a tragic accident, Isabella was rumored to have been a practitioner of the occult and had sought to communicate with the spirit of her deceased husband. Her experiments led to madness and ultimately her demise. As the days passed, the whispering in the house grew louder and more insistent. The once charming mansion began to reveal its malevolent nature. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and the couple began to experience vivid, terrifying nightmares. Michael's once joyful demeanor withered away, and he became withdrawn, spending long hours locked in his study, deciphering ancient texts about spirits and the afterlife. One night, as Emily lay in bed, the whispering grew so loud that she could almost make out the words. It was as if a chorus of tormented souls was crying out from within the walls. She trembled in fear, but she couldn't bring herself to wake Michael, knowing he was grappling with his own horrors. Emily's determination to uncover the truth overcame her fear. She reached out to a local paranormal investigator, a man named Dr. Benjamin Crane, who agreed to help them, armed with an array of equipment. Dr. Crane arrived at the mansion. His instruments immediately detected abnormal electromagnetic activity, and his audio recorders captured the eerie whispers. As they began their investigation, the atmosphere in the house grew oppressive. A sudden, bone-chilling gust of wind blew through the corridor, extinguishing the candles they had placed. The whispering escalated into a cacophony of anguished voices, and Emily felt as though she were being dragged into a vortex of darkness. Desperation gripped them all as they realized they were in the presence of an evil force they could not comprehend. The house itself seemed to warp and twist, as if it were alive. Dr. Crane urged them to flee, but it was too late. The mansion was relentless in its torment. As the haunting reached its peak, Emily and Michael made a last-ditch effort to save themselves. They gathered in the parlor, lit a circle of candles, and began a ritual they had discovered in their research. The atmosphere grew even more hostile as they recited the incantation. Shadows danced on the walls, and the whispering became deafening. In a final surge of energy, they banished the malevolent presence from the house. The mansion shuddered, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The couple collapsed, exhausted and terrified, but the torment had finally ceased. As the days passed, the mansion stood silent and still. The weight of its dark history seemed to have lifted. Emily and Michael had survived the horrors of Hollow Hill Mansion, but the scars on their souls would remain forever. They had learned that some houses hold secrets too sinister to be contained, and that the darkness within can consume those who dare to enter. Hollow Hill Mansion would forever be etched in their memories as a place of unspeakable terror, a dwelling that had nearly claimed their lives, and a testament to the power of malevolence that can reside in even the most charming of houses. Thank you so much for watching this video. We appreciate your support and hope you found it valuable. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider giving it a thumbs up by hitting the likes button below. If you want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Sharing is caring. If you think this video could be helpful or entertaining for someone else, please share it with your friends and family. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue creating content for you. Thanks again for being part of our community, and we look forward to bringing you more exciting content in the future.